marginalised society. Because I'm existing in a world that was not built for me.
I think like so many stereotypes are born from just our brains like lazily processing groups of people.
For so long, people that are marginalised or have like a physical difference were not represented and were not included within the rest of society, which then enhanced so much oppression and just negative perceptions of marginalised people from society.
Talking from my experience, I think that I feel marginalized, but not in the ways that a lot of able-bodied people might think. But I think that what kind of like causes, the oppression of disabled bodies in society is mostly like the attitudes and beliefs that able-bodied people have towards disabled people.
I have found more people like prey on me. It's a clear vulnerability, and I think people can be quite sadistic and almost use that as a means to marginalize me further and know that they could walk all over me in a way that maybe they couldn't someone who is able-bodied. And I feel there's this expectation that we're not going to bother to meet your needs, so tough luck if you miss out.
I get things said to me that people wouldn't dream of saying to someone who isn't in a marginalised body or someone that's non-disabled.
A lot of people look at disabled people and they're like, wow, I never want to live my life that way. Disabled bodies are still seen as a source of pity.
I suppose some experiences that I notice happen more regularly is if I go on a night out, there's always people coming up to me, making comments or congratulating my friends for being a decent enough person to spend time with me. And to some extent, I get used to it and I stop noticing it, which is a problem because it means that then we're not challenging it and questioning why society is this way. I'm awful that for you just to exist in a public space is groundbreaking and radical, and that's so not okay.
The general perception of disabled people as being parasites of society.
From a small age, I had internalized the beliefs that able-bodied people had about me, and so I believed that they must be true.
You feel a bit dehumanized. I think people don't see you as a multi-faceted human being.
I guess when I was younger, I definitely didn't feel my body as a disabled woman was really seen at all. In fact, I really think I felt kind of invisible in a way in a world where I was hugely visible. And so it's almost as if they don't see the female identity right away, I guess, if that makes sense.
We've all got this weird internal ableism of well, if you're trying, then it's fine, and if you're not, then you've succumbed to disability, rather than the fact that disability is inherent for a lot of us. I think the pandemic has only highlighted how little regard the general population has for disabled lives, and I think that the onus always falls on disabled people to be able to pave that change. And how are we able to do that when we're literally fighting to survive at the moment? And I definitely think that the root of all the sort of ableism and dismissal of disabled experience comes from just not having lived it.
I think that oppression towards disabled bodies is a lot more structural and in-depth, just like any other ism kind of is. Ableism is still very much, and oppression is still very much alive in this current generation as a result of inaccurate representations of young disabled or disabled people in general.
I think I have a warped window into what representation there is of marginalised people because of social media, and also just people aren't getting representation for because of maybe more boundaries and more access issues. So when you go on social media, the majority of representation is people who still have maybe the ability to access a phone or I just think there's a lot of voices that definitely aren't heard.
Also in mass media in general, and stuff that you see about disabled people online is through an able-bodied gaze. Like, you know, those ideas, I think, is what truly, like, kind of reinforce, like, oppression.
I think the current representation as well obviously puts disabled people on this really weird, inspiring pedestal. So the whole inspiration porn concept of a disabled person just going down the street is inspiring. Like, it's so tokenistic and, like, kind of sickening.
Want a piece of your disabledness as a way to inspire them to feel that their life isn't so bad.
Everything is always just coated with this sickly sweet, like, oh my god, that's so sweet, that's so inspiring, to the point that we are sort of, like, our personhood is removed from us and we're just objects of, like, pity and inspiration.
It's like, I'll be inspired by you, but I'm not going to change the way I think or the way I treat you, or, you know, you're still not equal. The future could be so bright. The future's got to be an internal change of people's attitudes.
It would be amazing to see a future where people's sort of benefit could be looked at outside of just the bubble of productivity. Like to see a future that's accessible in every way.
In the future, I think the world we'll live in is, like, hopefully striving to be more committed to the truth, rather than what we'd like to hear or what is easy to think about. So I think, like, once, like, more really active inclusion is happening, and so I think when that starts to happen, I think hopefully some changes will start to be made. And, you know, I think it will, because, you know, when that happens, honest representation actually happens, and so many things would change.
And I do see that change coming. I feel it brewing. I feel a movement coming.
I think ideally, I'd love to live in a world, like, where every person with any type of identity could feel included and seen and represented in society, and actually feel like people are, you know, advocating for them and fighting for them.
The world is nowhere near where it should be in terms of representing and celebrating marginalised bodies.
I guess, you know, just to feel like you have a place in the world, I would like to live in that world.
There's so much to be done, and I think it always starts with you. You have to be the change.